From comparing the film to previous DCEU movies to explain why fans didn't like the movie when it was first released, this is why Birds of Prey was actually the best DCEU movie ever. Before Birds of Prey premiered in 2020, critics touted how great of a film it was, especially after the last round of underwhelming DCEU movies they heavily criticized. But then the movie premiered in movie theaters around the world, and it stumbled at the box office, to say the least. The movie was released right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, which hurt its box office chances of becoming a real success. And then, whether because of the pandemic or because the movie was just different from what they wanted, many DCEU fans stated that Birds of Prey sucked. In reality, now 3 years away from the movie's premiere, this statement isn't true at all. Birds of Prey is actually the best DCEU movie ever, and criminally underrated when stacked up against its lesser DCEU offerings. First of all, you have to remember the other DCEU movies that came out before Birds of Prey, save the Dark Knight trilogy by Christopher Nolan, which is obviously fantastic. Just about every other major DC film fell flat by a long shot. Critics destroyed these movies, and even the most ardent DC fans proclaimed that the movies weren't great. Fans kept the optimism alive, as surely a good movie would come around. Instead of getting that great superhero movie everybody wanted, DC fans were met with basic, boring, and sometimes outright terrible movies. Remember how disappointing the Suicide Squad was, Justice League, and Batman and Superman were? We did get Wonder Woman, which was a good DCEU movie, and even 2013's Man of Steel had its great parts, though it still had its fair share of flaws. When you remember these DCEU failures that came about before the release of Birds of Prey, it's hard to criticize the Harley Quinn-led vehicle. Sure, one could say that Birds of Prey had its flaws, but not as many as 2016's Suicide Squad did. Birds of Prey was just inherently better than these previous DCEU offerings by a long shot. One of the main reasons why it was better, well, it was different. No other DCEU film is like Birds of Prey. Every other movie in the DCEU just feels incredibly different than what Birds of Prey gave us. This is incredibly apparent when looking at the rating of the film. Birds of Prey is rated R, whereas most of the other DCEU movies are rated PG-13. Most superhero movies, save a few, try to keep this PG-13 rating, as it allows more people to flock to the movie theaters to see it. An R rating, meanwhile, keeps younger kids and teenagers out, which could hurt box office numbers. Birds of Prey really utilized their R rating. From the humor to the violence, everything about this movie felt as if it was made for the adults of the DC fandom, rather than the families. Because of this, it was fun to watch. Harley Quinn, played marvelously by Margot Robbie, is one of those characters that truly thrives on screen, when there are no boundaries or restrictions. So this character does best in an R-rated film, and Birds of Prey proves that. Plus, the action scenes are violent, real, and gruesome to behold, or at least not overly CGI'd moments that fans have grown to hate over the years. Instead, we get action moments that are fun to watch, which can't necessarily be said about many of the other DCEU movies. Now, it's important to note that some fans criticized the R rating of the film when it first came out. Even though star Margot Robbie fought for this rating, fans and critics alike felt that the R rating kept many from seeing the movie in theaters, which then hurt its box office potential. Many teenagers wanted to see the film, and it appears that the movie did very well with the younger generations, but their parents didn't want them to see it, so they couldn't see it in the movie theaters, which might also be why it didn't do as well at the box office. But now, with enough time between Birds of Prey's release and seeing the other DCEU movies that have been released since, it's hard not to see that this film was just so much better than the other DCEU movies, especially because of that R rating, which allowed the characters and the movie as a whole to just let loose. You don't get to see this in many superhero movies, which is a shame. And though the R rating may have hurt box office sales to some extent, this doesn't mean that the movie is bad at all, as it's not. Another reason Birds of Prey is the best DCEU movie around has to do with the characters. Harley Quinn is someone we all know and love. Robbie's version of Harley Quinn was introduced in 2016's Suicide Squad, a movie critics and audiences despised. However, the one bright part of the movie was Robbie's Quinn, so fans were really excited to learn she was getting her own movie. So we all knew we'd love Harley going into the movie, but the other characters introduced in the film helped the story. Mary Elizabeth Winstead's portrayal of Helena Bertinelli, aka the Huntress in Birds of Prey, succeeded. Journey Smollett-Bell, who plays Dina Lance, also known as the Black Canary, the young Cassandra Cain, played by Ella J. Bosco, Gotham City police officer Renee Montoya, played by Rosie Perez, Ewan McGregor's portrayal of Roman Sionis, aka the Black Mask, and Victor Zsasz, played by Chris Messina. Somehow the movie managed to make all of these characters thrilling to watch, which is a hard feat to succeed at. We got riveting backstories that made these characters understandable, particularly when it came to Winstead's Huntress. Every character was different too, which helped the overall movie. After all, Harley Quinn is an absolute crazy character. She's full of humor, so having a character like the Huntress, who is very grounded and cynical, helps balance the characters out in all of the scenes they have together. The villains, played by McGregor and Messina, were also thrilling to watch in their insanity and cruelty. To see their dynamics set up against Quinn and the rest of the ladies, an absolute masterpiece, especially when you remember the other boring DCEU hero and villain fights over the years. Watching these characters, who all had their own backstories, their own motivations, and their own desires, and then seeing them come together for one purpose? Well, it's a lot of fun to watch. Birds of Prey was also incredibly different from the other DCEU movies in one of the biggest and most important ways. It was tonally different. It was structurally different too. In a way, it really felt like an original movie rather than the latest DC superhero offering that we're all used to. Think about it. Every time you sit down to watch another DCEU movie, you already know most of what to expect. The same can be said about most of the MCU movies, if not all. These superhero movies will now follow a structure that has been proven to succeed. So why stray from it? After all, even if a movie isn't very good, as many of the DCEU movies aren't perfect by any means, will people still show up to watch it and bring millions to the studio? So why change what has worked before? Fans want change, and studios now seem to understand this. We don't want to see the same boring movie over and over again, just with different heroes and villains. But it took a while for the DC bosses to really see this. With Birds of Prey, the complete tonal shift saved the movie. It made it original and completely its own. The movie's point of view, Harley Quinn breaking the fourth wall, the complete originality of it all make it feel very unique. And nothing like a normal DCEU movie, which is the best compliment a movie can be given. If all this is true, and I obviously think it is, why did Birds of Prey fail? Why do fans not like the movie, as many fans really don't? There are a variety of reasons for this, but many, including myself, believe this was just one of those movies that was ahead of its time. It was an R-rated, female-led superhero movie that was completely different from every other DCEU film released up until that point. It was creative and tried new things. It was even controversial in some areas. Sure, some of these things didn't work, and there are fair criticisms of the film to be made. But overall, when you look at the other movies the DCEU has put out, it's clear that Birds of Prey is the winning film. So from why fans didn't like the movie when it first came out, to how the film is better than the previous DCEU movies released, this was why Birds of Prey was actually the best DCEU movie ever.